So after the blade, it's time to tackle the blade mounts. These might not seem like many or difficult parts, but there are a few of them that are a bit tricky. So first off, we're going to do these large beams here. And we go in, just going to do a flatten to start out with a nice clean selection of polygons. Obviously, the one on the inside is not as important as the one on the outside. This one I have selected right here. This one's the most important one. It's going to be pretty obvious. Very, very important when we're going to be texturing that one. So gotta make sure to unwrap it decently. Then we've got this small part that sits over there. And I'm gonna be stitching some things. I was moving this part out, just rotating it, placing it in the correct position. That looks about right. Then we're gonna select all of these here so that we can do an unfold with them. Oh, there we go, I've got all of them. So unfold, make sure to turn off normalize. And then try and place it in a logical position. I'm turning on angle-based selection also, just to make it a little bit quicker to select specific polygons. Moving that one to the correct position. Let's see what I'll do with this one. I have to rotate it around to get it to match. Then these polygons sit at the base there. Then we've got the head of the main mounting bracket to attach it to the big axle of the suspension. Moving that around as well. And then the inside, the flatness split this up into a bunch of separate parts. So I've selected a few too many, and I've missed one there. And then unfold them. There we go, and that should be about correct. If we rotate that, we can fit it in there. And I'll be selecting these and performing an unfold as well. I'm just going to build a selection of pieces here. And obviously we have to weld this because annoyingly it split up a few parts. With these around, then we have those two big shields for the hydraulics, which we can just do a planar unwrap on. And a few small pieces left. Those are always the most annoying. Just trying to grab these and move them out into the correct positions like that. So then we've got this one where we're just going to do an unfold. Gotta make sure to weld all of that. And then use the text tools align function to get it to sit straight. Got some extra pieces left. There's not much more to do for this thing now. And there we are. That long stretch, I'm just going to have a single polygon. Again, welding those vertices. And then we have this part over here, which I've just simply performed a flatten on, move things around a little bit. Not too much work. So I prefer these to be, I'm thinking a single stretch is probably a better idea, so I'm going to re-unfold those, move them down. This part looks about correct. Wondering what this thing is. That's a detail of this area. So try and select the whole thing entirely around, and then performing an unfold on that. And it's slightly bent because the thing is tapered. I could consider straightening it, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just move it around later. Yeah, I can fit it in there. And that one will fit nicely in there. And a few more parts need to be moved around, and that will be it. So there we are. We've got these handles. Nothing too complex. Again, I'm going to start off with a flatten. And that looks pretty usable already. Got to move a few parts around to make the layout a bit more logical. Something like this. It probably makes more sense to group the more difficult ones together like that. There we go. That makes for a more compact layout. There's this one over there, like so. And then group these like that, and that should be it for the puzzle piece here. Now, next up is this big hydraulic piston. And this is one that requires quite a bit of work because it's not exactly an easy part. Mainly because of the head there. The parts at the bottom are not that difficult. So I'm making a selection here, and I'm going to perform a cylindrical map on those. Then right here, we've got this conical shape. For the cone shape, I'm going to use an unfold. I could also consider using a cylindrical there, but I'm not doing it because it's going to distort the UVs too much. I prefer to go for the cone shape layout. Gotta weld a bunch of stuff there. Same here. And instead of redoing the cylindrical map, I can just detach them to move the seam to the back. There we go. This part here, try placing it inside some of these open gaps. Now these parts, like I mentioned before, might want to keep these separate so that the shading with the normal maps will work correctly. And select these faces. And just keep doing the same thing. So again, this really is a prime example of like keeping the UV separate, because we also want to keep the smoothing group separate there. That should be it for all these specific sides. And you can see we still have a lot more tiny parts left to do. Alright, so there we are, back to face mode. And this star shape thing here, this one seems unwrapped decently. Don't have to touch it too much. But all of those separate little nuts and bolts that sit on there, they're taking up a lot of UV space. So I'm just trying to filter out all the small parts, trying to find out what they are and what the best way would be to unwrap them. And these parts, trying to think where I should fit them in. We've also got these two attachment bracket parts. They're quite simple to unwrap, nothing special with them. Just two planers, and a few extra unfolds. Again, doing some welding. And there's this little tube on the inside that connects them. I'm wrapping that one separately as well. Then next up is the two front and back sides of that little tube. And then we're going to move this one slightly closer. And we still have a bunch of those annoying, almost triangular shaped parts left. We're going to have to go over each and every one of those and puzzle them in here. So after I've done that, we're not showing you everything since it's quite boring, just a bit more puzzling. I see that I still have to move the seam for this thing. Seam really is sitting in a very obvious location, so I don't really want that. And once I've moved the seam, which I just do by detaching the middle and then welding the parts that were previously open, I'm going to this part, which again I started off with a flatten. And then just selecting the faces that sit together, making sure I weld all of them. So even if I do a flatten at the start, doesn't mean that I'm going to use much of the mapping that the flatten uses. It makes a good base, but as soon as there's some sort of curved piece in there, it makes more sense to try and do an unfold or something, or even just go over it manually. I just personally hate to work with the jumbled mess that gets generated by default when you're UVing things, because it's really hard to tell what you still have left to do. Well, right, the way I do it, you just have to look up and you see, okay, there's a few parts left, where can I fit these? It helps to keep an oversight. So these parts, move them slightly closer. Also got these big ones left. Okay, so that's it for that part. Next up is this sort of sliding beam for the other side of the blade attachments. Moving that around a bit as well. And unfold on this piece. Gives me a quite usable UV. Place that one over there. So doing a flatten again, I'm trying to see what I can use of this part. Most of it seems pretty useful. But of course the flatten splits up a few of the curved areas like this one, so I'll have to do another unfold over there. It's that one. Like that. And then most of it should be okay, should be something we can work with. Trying to see if there's any other problems. The end piece, it all looks fine. So for once, for a simple, really boxy shape like this one, you can actually even get away with working with what flatten generates for you. And a few of these parts, obviously, need to move them a little bit closer because the spacing is a bit much. And then place these together. There we are. And I'm pulling these apart again for the shading because this part really won't play well with single smoothing groups. So we're splitting the UVs in anticipation of the final smoothing group fix-up that we'll be doing later. So moving it out. And every single time I finish the part, I change the color to light blue. So it gives me an overview of what I have left to do because there are so many separate parts, it might get difficult otherwise. Bring that one down. Bring that one into place over there. These inside parts, they're not too important. So the seams are not very important. I can just unwrap them in a bit of a quicker way. Trying to space them out correctly. And then this inside loop, we have a bunch of small things here, very annoying to work with. I figure out what they all are. Once I've got them, I'm just doing an unfold on them to create a single stretch. This part here makes for a bit of a difficult piece, so I'm going to do this curve thing first. Unfold it, place it close by. Move that one up and move them around. And see, there's a nasty attached strip to that. I just want to cut them apart so I have something that's a bit easier to puzzle with. Okay, so we have a few crazy shapes here. They're on the inside, so I can get away with cutting them apart. And these inside parts, I'm scaling these down because they're going to be pure black anyway. So it doesn't really matter that the UVs are distorted. Same for this one. Very, very unimportant pieces. But you do need to have the geometry there. Just make sure not to waste too much UV space on them. And these brackets at the top and the sort of top lights for the bulldozer. Just doing a few flattens on them and grabbing pieces from the flatten and grouping these together. Also trying to not attach too many parts together here because, well, you want to keep in mind that the smoothing groups are also going to act different there. Going to act annoying. So I'm not sharing too much UV space on this thing as well because I have to keep the ambient occlusion in mind. So there we go. I've done most of it. And now I'm going to be puzzling a bit with these parts. Trying to puzzle them together. So we've got this part of the blade here, which is going to form like the core of the UVs. And we're going to start slowly building these other pieces around it. So just grabbing them and placing them somewhere where I feel it makes sense. So that one fits there. At first, again, like with the previous one where we did the orange parts for the body, at first it's easy to group them together. You know, you could just grab these big blocks and place them together. But just like in Tetris, it gets harder the more you have to puzzle with. So these are overlapping a bit. I want to move those out so we can avoid any overlapping. There we go. Moving this one in here. This one has a bit of a difficult shape to work with. So let's see where we're going to place that one. Which piece is that exactly? Okay. That still makes sense logically to place it. When you're puzzling like this, always got to keep in mind, if you move pieces around, don't move them too far away or it would become really hard to find them again when you get to the texturing. We still have some gaps, but we're not that far yet with this layout. So we can come back later and fill up the gaps in the end. Place that one over there. And these should fit there, but we're going to have to make sure that the parts are not overlapping. So don't have that many puzzle pieces left. Some of them are very easy to put into place, like these. They go pretty quickly. What's this one? Ah, that's one of the little bolts or nuts that's at the front. And then this is the bottom hydraulic part. Fit that in there. We can actually try and fit the rest of this thing right there. Let's see. We move these around. Then we can fit this piece in here. And we should be almost there with the puzzling for the blade mounts right now. Move them apart a bit further. That should be it, so I'm moving it out again. And collapsing everything so we save our work. And then we're going to have to make sure that these pieces are nicely instanced. Deselecting the splines, change the color. And there we are. That's it for this part.